Wild, insulting, and unforgettable. That is Blazing Saddles. However, there is a certain scenario that remains unnoticed, even after half a century. A blunder so audacious and peculiar that it seemed almost too unbelievable to be true. Everything from hidden casting blunders to fart jokes to cowboys who speak Yiddish to moments that were too frightening to air in fart jokes. You would be surprised at how messy the truth is behind this film. Do you know what Mel Brooks hid? By the way, who was that random person in the last shot? Now let's find out, beginning with establishing the scene, Blazing Saddles and its perseverance. People were on the fence about whether to laugh or leave the theater in 1974 when Blazing Saddles was released. It finished with a battle on set that broke the fourth wall, mocked racism head-on, and shredded the cowboy stereotype. It was insulting. Someone yelled. It was effective in some way. Why, though, was it ever created? How was it able to get past the censor? By the way, has anybody ever noticed the massive error in Blazing Saddles? Blazing Saddles' mayhem and genius can only be grasped in the context of 1974 America. A humiliating end had been made to the Vietnam War. The collapse of Watergate was imminent. Nixon was about to step down as president. Faith in the government was minimal. Despite the civil rights movement's success in the courts, racism persisted in the United States, particularly on screen. Even now, white males are the heroes in Hollywood westerns, while all other characters are just incidental. It wasn't Mel Brooks' only intention to parody westerns. "I want to blow them up," he said. Although Blazing Saddles takes place in the Old West, film primarily focuses on America in the 1970s. The story is quite straightforward. A town named Rock Ridge is the target of a rapacious land developer who, in an effort to force the settlers to leave, manipulates the governor into appointing a black sheriff, betting that the residents will fear and go away. Bart, the new sheriff, Cleavon Little, surprises everyone with his intelligence, wit, and competence. As Bart takes the lead in battling the villains and the small-minded village that sought to destroy him, what starts as a racist con evolves into a surreal, genre-defying uprising. From the outside, it appears to be a slapstick comedy. However, a risky concept lies beneath the jokes and music. That bigotry dissolves in the face of humor and light. Blazing Saddles was both a potent and divisive work because of that. Even when used to poke fun at racism, the N-word was shocking to audiences. Toilet humor in popular movies was foreign to them. No one in town was expecting a black hero to foil the plans of every white man. With some lines he probably didn't even realize he had, Brooks was trying to get his point across. Although he wasn't working alone, Mel Brooks directed the picture. Among his collaborators was the era's most courageous black comic, Richard Pryor. When Pryor wrote a joke, it was sure to hit you square in the face. He had a hand in making Bart into a person who saw the ludicrousness of his predicament in addition to being calm and intelligent. Due to his experience with hazardous narcotics, the studio declined to insure Pryor, who was originally intended to play Bart himself. The movie's tone might have been drastically altered by that choice. A touch of Broadway glitz and deadpan humor came from Cleavon Little, Unnoticed. The script was given fire by Pryor. Everyone was the target of the picture. Some people are racist while others are politicians, cowboys, actors, or studio moguls from yesteryear. Nobody was secure. That satire had to be understated, was completely destroyed by it. Politeness was of no concern to Blazing Saddles. It was going for a slap in the face and then trying to get you to laugh at how silly it was. Without regard for the feelings of those it hurt, it blended lowbrow with high concept, so long as the target demographic understood. And what was the outcome? A film that would be completely out of place in today's cinema. The film makes a message even in its last moments, and they now. Blazing Saddles deviates from its traditional Western setting by bursting beyond the actual walls of the Warner Brothers studio, encroaching on other sound stages, Hollywood streets, and ultimately a theater playing the identical film. There is a lot of chaos. It's ridiculous. This is just brilliant. They realize they're in a movie. The characters realize. Mel Brooks ends the cycle with complete anarchy, and the satire devours itself. The groundwork for subsequent self-aware American comedies, such as Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Deadpool, was laid by this ground-breaking finale. However, a moment so fleeting that no one noticed it for decades did manage to sneak past all this chaos, and once you lay eyes on it, there's no turning back. Part 2. The immoral joke that turned out to be Blazing Saddles' worst secret flaw. The most frightening part of Blazing Saddles was cut from the final cut. This is neither an accident that happened on stage, nor is it a prank. Even Mel Brooks, the guy responsible for bringing farts to the big screen, felt he couldn't carry out the deleted scene because of how absurd, charged, and iconic it is. Now for the exciting part. This scene was mostly unknown until quite recently. It was there submerged in memories and interviews whispered about but never seen. It has now made a triumphant return, and it alters your perception of the film in every way. Then, what exactly happened? Why was it sliced? Why has its significance grown recently? Blazing Saddles' final cut included a hilarious bedroom scene with Madeline Kahn's gorgeous Lily Von Stepp and Cleveland Little's Sheriff Bart. It's quite seductive. It hints at something. In comparison to the original footage, though, it is completely inadequate. After a romantic candlelit dinner, Lily and Bart are seen in the alternate version in her dressing room, as well as the not-so-subtle euphemism Schnitzenruben, which is used to describe it. The screen goes dark and Lily's voice, with a heavy German accent, pierces the darkness as the lights go out. Is it true that you are all exceptionally well-built? Is that so? A moment has passed. Nobody knows what happens next. The joke follows. I apologize for letting you down, ma'am, although you're kissing my arm. The movie would have taken a huge risk in one scene by making fun of a long-held cliché about black men's bodies and then tearing it apart with a deadpan statement. If that one scene had been cut, the film's already explosive mix of race, physicality, humor, and innuendo would have been even more exaggerated. Still, though, it was never accepted, for the simple reason that there were constraints even for Blazing Saddles. In interviews, Mel Brooks has discussed this scene, including one with Conan O'Brien. He went on to say that he was concerned it would go too far beyond satire and become something that would eclipse everything else. Since he was attempting to tread a fine line between comedy and commentary, he deemed the risk too great and put it on ice. That scene, however, was not the only one trimmed. The production notes and recollections of the crew contain an additional passage of dialogue. As she is ready to seduce Bart, Lily Von Stepp turns up the charm once more in this scene. At first glance, it seems like she is advising him to remove his belt of ammunition. The intended meaning of the sentence is obviously an invitation. Spoken with an alluring sweetness, the message is packed into one seemingly insignificant line. The third scene is a similarly controversial but unrealized discussion that was never developed. The legendary campfire scene in Blazing Saddles, where the cowboys eat beans and pass gas, is one of the film's most memorable moments. It was the first of its kind in Hollywood. No big picture had ever used a flatulence humor with sound until 1974. Not only that, Mel Brooks didn't merely permit it. He staked it all. He really went back into post-production after the first cut and added additional fart sounds. Hold just a second. The test audiences were laughing so hard that they missed the punchline. And it was all because Brooks had insight that the studio lacked. It wasn't only for laughs. A greater thing was happening here. The cowboy had been idealized for many years by Westerns. Firm, quiet, heroic, unfalteringly stoic, and spotless. It was an illusion that Brooks wished to shatter. He aimed to portray cowboys as earthy, gruff, sweaty, overindulgent, and unclean individuals who slept on the ground rather than as mythical beings. Hollywood had spent decades cultivating a lovely, polished image, and audiences adored it when it shattered that image. Warner Brothers' upper management, though, wasn't making fun of it. The moment was deemed filthy, lowbrow, and meaningless by them. By disregarding their objections and retaining the scene, Brooks contributed to a rethinking of what might be seen and ridiculed in mainstream comedy. The dedication to anarchy extended beyond the realm of sound effects. It went on until the film's final showdown, which happens on the Warner Brothers lot rather than in the made-up town of Rock Ridge. In the last scene, the fourth wall is purposefully and absurdly broken. The plot thickens as the characters engage in combat through staged saloons, collide during a musical number, and eventually reach a street in Hollywood, where the drama unfolds in front of an actual theater. It's supposed to be absurd and chaotic, but something unexpected happened even in that mayhem. A sweater-clad man strolls serenely into the center of the image as the cast dashes out the studio gate and onto the street. He performs a vital role. That guy isn't dressed up. He has no screen time whatsoever. He was merely passing by, an unplanned onlooker who unexpectedly stumbled upon a film set while the cameras were rolling. "Leave him in," Mel Brooks urged the team, rather than editing the shot or attempting to remove him. Funny. Really? Furthermore, he was absolutely correct. An already ridiculous scene is made much more so by the man's presence, confused, casual, and unaware. Inadvertently, he became an unfixable live blooper in the annals of cinema. These unplanned sequences ended up being the most memorable parts of the movie. Role as the Waco Kid, Gene Wilder frequently improvised line changes due to his casual and carefree delivery. Cleavon Little brought an unscripted intellect to Bart with his facial expressions, dry tone, and subtle sarcasm. Madeline Kahn's breathy off-key rendition of "I'm Tired" is just one of several well-known lines that the actress improvised while playing Lily Von Stupp. It wasn't just that Brooks let this mayhem happen. That was what he desired. He held the view that spontaneity, rather than premeditated humor, was the source of comedy, and that an ill-timed gaffe may occasionally be more entertaining. The scenario with the Native Americans who speak Yiddish is the clearest example of this idea in action. A band of mounted fighters surrounds Bart and his family in a childhood memory flashback. It appears to be the start of a bloodbath. However, Mel Brooks's character, the tribal chief, eventually speaks, not to mention that it is not an indigenous language, such as Apache or Sioux. "I speak Yiddish." Properly articulated, natural speech. Nodding in accord, the other fighters join in. Everyone goes to their feet and yells, "Shabbos, it startsel me." It's funny and bizarre all at the same time. So what exactly is it saying? It was clear that Brooks was an expert. Bringing attention to the past treatment of indigenous peoples in Hollywood westerns, he made the Native Americans speak a Jewish dialect. Almost infrequently were they given actual language and frequently shown as an alien enemy, rather than a fellow human being. Brooks exposed the falsehood and shallowness of those depictions by providing them with Yiddish. This sequence is effective not only because it comes as a surprise, but also because it conveys a genuine message. Even the film's opening music features the combination of satire and absurdity on absurdity. Blazing Saddles is a well-known Western balladeer by Frankie Laine, who is recognized for his very moving vocal performances. His singing is passionate, full of life, and powerful. That was precisely the goal that Brooks had in mind. The staff was instructed not to inform Laine that it was a comedy, he said. Theme music from a tragic epic was playing in Laine's head. "You sing every note in line as if it were high noon." On the other hand, the lyrics paint a quite different picture, replete with inflated cliches and hyperbolic imagery. And what was the outcome is outrageous, an incredibly solemn song that devolves into absurdity, supported by an unfunny performance. When it came to humor, Mel Brooks knew that it wasn't all about the gags. At other times, it was about creating a ridiculous environment that made people giggle uncontrollably. On occasion, it was as simple as letting accidents in and living with them. Every instance of raunchy jokes, potty humor, and blooper that made it into the final cut was there for the same reason, to show how strong chaos might be. It wasn't necessary for that humor to be flawless. There was no room for timidity. That, more than anything else, is the thing that makes Blazing Saddles unique among its contemporaries. Scenes in the film frequently appear to be on the verge of collapsing, yet that serves the purpose. The anarchy and improvising are where the comedy is, as well as the unpolished decisions made in real time. Here you have it. The narrative of how a film known for its fart jokes, inauthentic horses, and unintentional walk-ons rose to the status of one of the most lauded comedies of all time. There was purpose behind it. Deliberately chaotic, yet controlled enough to function, wild enough to feel authentic, and courageous enough to irrevocably alter the norms of comedy. Chapter 4. Opposing the studio, with Brooks taking on Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers was in a state of terror when they viewed Blazing Saddles' final cut. There was total silence in the screening room. Nobody in charge laughed. They remained silent. It was supposedly deemed too obscene for American viewers by one. It was characterized by another as a career-ending event. However, Mel Brooks remained adamant that they were completely mistaken while seated in that identical room. What occurs when a studio rejects a film that the director is passionate about? In the event that the largest Hollywood studio attempts to censor a picture only to have it cause a cultural tremor, what will happen next? Not only was Blazing Saddles directed by Mel Brooks, all rights were his. His contract explicitly granted him the ability to make the final cut. That rendered the studio's attempts to edit or censor his film illegally contingent upon his consent. Almost every filmmaker dreams about this. A nightmare ensued for Warner Brothers. The fact that the picture disregarded all regulations was the biggest concern for the company. At the time, Warner Brothers CEO Ted Ashley made it plain that he wanted the picture to be laid to rest with the utmost respect and secrecy. Industry insiders claim that Ashley instructed his staff to surreptitiously take the picture from theaters after a small number of large cities had shown it. We wanted to see how things worked. No one would even notice if it bombed. The director might be held responsible if it generated controversy. For films that the studio had doubts about, it was a typical strategy. Except Mel Brooks had different intentions. This kind of opposition was nothing new to him. The storyline of his previous picture, The Producers, which was about a musical named Springtime for Hitler, had already pushed people out of their comfort zones. For Best Original Screenplay, he had won an Oscar. However, this in no way ensured that Blazing Saddles would be successful. More danger lurked. Its volume was higher. Furthermore, it was unconcerned with being cautious. What Brooks had made wasn't merely comical in his opinion. It prompted viewers to reevaluate their assumptions about the world. Nothing they've ever seen before will make people laugh harder than this, he had declared. Unfortunately, that faith would be put to the test almost immediately due to the rough start to Blazing Saddles production. One major issue was how the casting process went downhill. Sheriff Bart was originally supposed to be played by Richard Pryor, who collaborated with Brooks on the writing. His wit, knowledge, and age were all just right. However, there was an issue. His insurance was turned down by Warner Brothers. Pryor has a history of arrests stemming from drug possession and a reputation for using dangerous substances. He was considered a recognized risk by the studio. It was against the law for him to work on set without insurance. Although Pryor remained on as a writer, the part was cast by Cleavon Little, an actor with no notable film credits at the time who was active on Broadway. The casting process had other problems as well. The part of the Waco Kid originally belonged to Gig Young, a veteran actor who has won an Oscar. It was reasonable on paper. The delivery was dry, and Young had that worn appearance. However, the studio failed to notice a problem in a timely manner. Teenager was fighting alcoholism. He passed out during filming the scene where he awakens in a prison cell on his very first day on site. Manufacturing ceased. It infuriated Brooks. A last-minute substitute was required of him. He contacted Gene Wilder at that moment. Because of their previous experience working together on The Producers, Wilder and Brooks trusted one another. The moment Brooks pitched the idea of the Waco Kid, a drunken gunfighter with a good heart, to Wilder, she enthusiastically agreed. He took a plane the following day and began filming immediately. One of the film's most memorable aspects would later be his performance. Despite everything going on around him, Wilder maintained an air of strangeness and serenity. In spite of the film's ridiculousness, his timing was spot on, and his connection with Cleavon Little provided the film's emotional foundation. Still, Blazing Saddles wasn't exactly a paper winner. Despite being offered a cameo in the film, John Wayne politely declined. "It was too blue," he remarked, for his picture. "It's too filthy, according to the old Hollywood cliché. I won't be able to be in it, but I'll be the first in line to see it," Wayne allegedly expressed to Brooks. For those on the inside, that kind of response just served to heighten the film's perceived risk. Even worse was the fact that Brooks was completely in charge. Studios value consistency over spontaneity, but no one was prepared for the shocking consequences of the film's February 1974 premiere. This is the New York-Los Angeles debut, and Chicago's star began to soar. The runs of certain theaters were prolonged indefinitely. When Warner Brothers realized they had misjudged the situation, they rushed to increase distribution. Out of nowhere, the film that was slated for burial became the year's biggest comedy, grossing over $100 million. The credit for realizing this idea belongs to a single director who chose to fight a whole system. The original plan for Blazing Saddles was to include Richard Pryor as the lead. His casting as the story's central character, the calm and quick-witted black Sheriff Bart, was an obvious option, and he also co-wrote the screenplay and helped craft its sharpest humor. However, the studio intervened when casting the part became necessary. Warner Brothers turned down Pryor's insurance application due to his problematic drug past, which includes a recent arrest for possession of illegal substances. Because of this, he was deemed too dangerous to employ from a production and legal standpoint. One boss even went so far as to call him a well-known sniffer within the company. The picture relied on Pryor's voice and vision, but he couldn't participate without insurance. The result was a sticky situation for the production. They required a leading man or woman capable of shouldering the satire, keeping up with the fast-paced humor, and sustaining the enormous artistic risks of the picture. It was discovered to be Cleavon Little, a seasoned actor with Broadway honors, who was that individual. Bart felt a new type of enthusiasm from Little, angular, chilly, and impersonal. He has a controlled, sarcastic, and charmingly dry performance. Little played Bart with pinpoint accuracy, which paid off, in contrast to Pryor's potentially fiery approach. The delivery heightened the racial mockery. Little doesn't sugarcoat the scene where Bart takes a gun to himself in order to flee from a lynch mob. Despite how ridiculous the situation is, he maintains his composure. The film's enduring appeal is due in part to its masterful balancing act of seriousness and comedy. However, from that point on, casting was still a pain. An Oscar-winning actor with a history of dramatic performances, Gig Young, was originally cast as the Waco Kid. It was reasonable on paper. A famous gunslinger who became drunk and took refuge in the local prison is known as the Waco Kid. However, he was also severely addicted to alcohol. Production came to a halt when crew workers noticed that the Waco Kid was going through alcohol withdrawal during the opening scene, in which he is hanging upside down in a prison cell. He was promptly fired and a search for a successor initiated by Brooks. He needed not to search very hard. Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder had previously collaborated on Producers, and Wilder was famous for playing characters who were complex, vulnerable, and hard to predict. Concerned, Brooks contacted him. Soon after agreeing to do the part, Wilder took to the skies the following day and began filming without delay. His portrayal of the Waco Kid, which was equal parts bone-dry sarcasm and spaced-out wisdom, was one of the film's most memorable aspects. Despite the mayhem all around him, Wilder brought a sense of tranquility and the fantastical to the table. There was an instant and natural connection between him and Cleavon Little. Their interplay reflected the film as a whole, two strangers trying to find their way through a mad world. The slick, greedy monster who plotted to destroy Rock Ridge was played by Harvey Korman. His portrayal veers between comic sketch and Shakespearean villainy. The dramatic flourish with which Korman delivers his sentences verges on parody, but never quite crosses the line. The character's effectiveness was due to that control. In addition to being hilarious, Korman was dedicated. Unlike a cartoon, he dealt with Lamar as an actual human being.